This is a map that shows population density in Indiana in 1890. And what I like about this is it uses the geography of the township, which for the most part, these townships are relatively the same size. So we're not comparing apples and oranges, we're comparing similar size areas. And what we're going to see here as I move into more recent times is this particular map. What it shows is blue pretty much everywhere. And what I mean by that is look at the rural areas. You're going to see a lot of counties in Indiana that are going to go from being blue or light blue to becoming white. And what's happening in there is Indiana in 1890 was quite a rural state, and this makes sense. This is very much an agricultural state in which people were moving here to do agriculture. Further, there was land available in the particular parts there in central Indiana. A lot of land available, and then northern Indiana, eventually those will become even more accessible. But with that being said, we still see some important cities. We see New Albany and Clarksville, we see Indianapolis, Richmond, Terre Haute, Lafayette, Fort Wayne, South Bend, and very early on, you see Gary is still white. And so once again, this is 1890. Also, what's good about this map is, yep, Indiana was quite rural, so a lot of blue all over. Also, we have pockets where Indiana was not heavily populated. And first off, there in the upland areas of south central and southern Indiana that I've mentioned earlier. And so the physical environment did not make this area useful or good for agriculture. And so subsequently, not a place people were interested in large numbers. Even further up here, this is an area along the Kankakee River that was extremely marshy, extremely boggy, so not really conducive for agriculture. Now, eventually they drained it. Also, what you had is you had some people that are kind of buying up the land, and so they were kind of buying it up and saying, nope, we're not going to sell it. And so you also have some land speculators. Also, this is the prairie part of Indiana. And so at first, this is the area that was not really interested in terms of agricultural purposes. However, that did eventually change. Also, what we have here is the rise of this whole eastern and east central Indiana area. This area from Kokomo to Indianapolis, over to Newcastle, Richmond, very industrial. And so what was going on there was natural gas. And so the Indiana gas boom was right now getting ready to kickstart. And so there's just now being found. And so we had this new developing industry here. Other things we got going on here. Over here, this is coal country. And so a lot of these are early coal towns in which they pop up because why were people living there? Because coal was being dug out of the mines, and coal combined with gas, those are becoming new hot fuel sources or energy sources. And so Indiana had at the time a very in-demand local product. Now let's go in time to 1950. And so I'm going to go back and forth, 1890, 1950. 1890, 1950. What you see is some patterns. First off, we see the massive rural to urban migration. And so that pretty much happens all throughout the state. And so there's a domestic migration happening in which people are leaving those rural counties. The agricultural lifestyle, the farms have already been essentially built. They've already been constructed. There's not really new areas for new farms. So really those are new opportunities for jobs for individuals. Where were those new opportunities? In the industrializing areas of Indianapolis, East Central Indiana, Fort Wayne, Terre Haute, Evansville, Louisville, but overwhelmingly Northern Indiana, Northwest Indiana, in this particular part of Michiana. So what we got going on here is this rural to urban migration in which, in particular, Northern Indiana was the beneficiary. So at the same time, what's going on is those international immigrants and those immigrants from the South, from the Great Migrations, where were they moving? This is where they're moving to. They were moving to these dark blue areas. They were moving to Gary. They were moving to South Bend, Fort Wayne, Indianapolis, and the industrial parts of Indiana. What also we see here is the start of suburbanization. And so you start to see these ring counties becoming destinations for individuals. That really becomes apparent when I go now to the year 2000. And so when I go from 1950 to the year 2000, Very clearly, we see suburbanization. Further, continued industrialization. It's still not like Northwest Indiana, some steel factories close, or maybe something, a factory up in this particular part of Fort Wayne or something might close. There's still people moving there. And so these areas, although they lose jobs in industries, they gain jobs in other types of industries. Things like healthcare, things like education, things like working in retail, sales, management, and so on. And so what happened here is, in case of Indianapolis, is a large outmigration, suburbanization. So essentially what's going on here is the immigrants of today, they're scattering out all throughout Indiana. They're going to rural areas, but they're also going to urban areas. So I like using this particular time from 1890 to 1950 to 2000 to show those big picture themes that we've been looking at. Those international immigration waves. Where were they going? When were they going? Also, what we have is those internal migrations, a domestic migration of people going from rural areas to urban areas, and then later from urban areas to suburban areas, and from rural areas to suburban areas as well.